if the second place team in the ACC is a 10-win team, I think the ACC is going to get a second team in. And I do. I think it'll be hard to get a third or a fourth SEC team. I don't see them getting any more than 3 in.
Well, I could see them using a crowbar to wedge them in, because that's what they did last year after they took that crowbar to the back of our skull and cracked it open. It's tough, because you're talking about, again, 5 auto bids. Notre Dame is 6.
Yeah,
right?
6 more bids.
So 6 more bids. Your runners up in the SEC and the Big Ten certainly are in.
So 4 more bids.
Probably the team in this division that couldn't get to the SEC championship, because I don't think they still have West and East, don't they, in the SEC?
Mm-hmm.
They do. So let's say Georgia gets to the championship game.
Well, they're going to, yeah.
And Tennessee finishes second in that side, and they've got 2 losses. They're in. So now you're down to 3.
Depends
you're
on
going to get rewarded for not going to Atlanta. I really believe in the SEC.
It's going to be.
I think also the West. So let's just say it's Georgia, LSU, and Bama's in second in the West, and they've got 2 losses, and Tennessee's got 2 losses, and they're second in the East. Both of those teams are in. So now you're down to 2 spots, I think.
And the Big Ten will get a second team in. The non-champion probably gets in.
Right. Well, and that's interesting in its own right, because that might be like Iowa in the West. They might not get in, but the Ohio State, Michigan non-championship game representative would get in. Wait a minute. There's Oregon now. What am I talking about? Oregon's out there. So, man, I don't think there's room. I just did it. I don't think there's room. I think you're a 1-bid league, maybe 2 if everything falls.
I think if you're a 10-win top 15 team out of the ACC, you probably get in. I think you got to be a 10-win team. I don't think you can have 3 losses and get in. I don't think so. But if you're a 10-2 team, it depends on who you beat, of course, obviously, and who you lost to. But I mean, not every 10-win team is built the same way, just like not every 9 or 12 or whatever it is.
That's the argument that they're going to make. Well, I'm sorry, but I know they finished 3rd in the West, but 10-2 Ole Miss is a far better team than a 10-2 Florida State or a 10-2 Miami. So they're getting in over Florida State. You could even do it by names of schools. So there's 5 auto bids. Let's just say that the Big Ten's representative is Ohio State. Let's just say they actually live up to expectations for the first time in a little while, and they do follow through. If it's close, Oregon's in. If it's close, Michigan if Michigan's a 10-win team, they get in. They probably won't be. If Texas, let's just say Georgia's the representative for the SEC. Texas probably still gets in. Tennessee probably still gets in if they're 10 wins.
We think
Alabama could. I mean,
here's your problem, Tom. The SEC is going to beat the hell out of each other. And I know that's what they've always said for years, but they're going to do that. I don't think there's a bunch of. I think there's a lot of 2 to 3 loss SEC teams this year, and now all of a sudden, if you got a 10-win top 10 ACC team or top 12 ACC team, and you're trying to make an argument for a 3-loss SEC team, I don't know, man. I think especially if that 10-win team is FSU, I don't think they screw us twice. I think we get in.
I don't know. I think if it's close, they will. And if they can, they will. Put it that way. If they can, they will. And so let's just say Notre Dame gets in. And you're talking about non-SEC and Big Ten. So 3 others. So you got 4 bids before you get to SEC, Big Ten. Right? So I think you're setting the over/under at that point at 6.5 SEC and Big Ten teams that are getting into the playoff field. And at that point,
in total, so I'm okay.
It gets close.
It's really close, and the season will provide the answers. It's fun to speculate like this, but I got to go back through. I did this exercise, and I got to find out where I put it. I wrote down I went through Texas's schedule. I went through Georgia's schedule. I went through Alabama's schedule. I went through Michigan and Ohio State. And I was just kind of going through all these. And the way it kind of worked out in my head, now these are games that I'm playing in my head on paper, so it doesn't mean anything. But as I was doing this, I was like, man, it sure is a lot of 3-loss SEC teams here. I don't know, buddy. I don't know.
It won't. No, a 3-loss SEC team will get in over a 2-loss ACC team. It will. Last year, a 0-loss ACC team did not get in over 1-loss Big 12 team.
It was the 1 year. It was the 1 year they could do that, and we've talked about the circumstances that were set up.
Jordan could have been healthy, and it would have happened. Old Kirky Poo started that thing in before Jordan's leg broke. So
yeah, but it was 4 teams, and the system was screwed up to begin with. Remember, we said this was bound to happen. It was unprecedented because it hadn't happened. But most of us said from the beginning, this is the dumbest thing in the world to have 5 power conferences and 4 playoff spots. Somebody from a power conference is going to get screwed someday. Turns out that somebody was us, but it was always in the making. They got lucky in the past that it didn't happen. It should have happened before then.
Well,
so
they had to clear out in this instance. The clear out was 0 versus 1 in terms of losses, and either Texas or Alabama has to get screwed. I mean, that's the trap.
Yeah, they had to get Alabama in, and the only way they could get Alabama in was they had to put Texas in. And so once Texas was in, we were out. And that was crazy and wrong and unprecedented. There's 12 teams. You don't have to do that now. That last year was really the only year that could happen. I would be surprised after the uproar that's just occurred, in which you were able to call into question the integrity of the sport, that you would want to do that again.
It was great for ratings. I think they'd absolutely do it again. They got unbelievable ratings. Hell, we got a lot of clicks that we didn't want because of this travesty. That Georgia-Florida State press conference is one of our most viewed videos of the year. That useless exercise of Kirby and Mike talking about a game that mattered not was one of the most viewed things because people were like, what the hell just happened? I think because they broke the dam, it makes it easier to do in the future. I don't think it scares them from doing it more.
They'll never be devoid of controversy, whether it's you're deciding who's 4 and who's 5, or who's 12 and who's 13, or who's 14 and who's 15, because they're going to 14 soon. It should have just jumped to 16 and be done with it. But anyhow, the point would be there's always going to be controversy about this, but I don't know that they'll actively try to screw somebody at, you're going to have arguments about 13 and 12 because those are teams that by definition are 2 and 3 loss teams.
Right.
And so the arguments are going to be like degrees to who sucks more.
So to me, the only way that you can make a case, if we're not the ACC champion, is we go 11-1 and we lose the ACC championship game. That's the only time that you can make the case for Florida State, because at that point you will have beaten 2 out of 3 of Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame in order to make it to the college football, or in order to make it to the ACC championship, and you've got an at-large victory over Notre Dame. This is why I consistently say that when you're looking for the ACC race, you're playing Clemson, Miami, and SMU. You got to win 2 out of those 3 games. And if you want an at-large bid, add Notre Dame into that mix. SMU, Clemson, Miami, Notre Dame. You got to win 3 out of 4 if you want an at-large bid, because at that point you need to have a poker chip over Notre Dame. But if you go 10-2 and you lose in the ACC championship game, you really haven't beaten anybody. They're going to hold you out. If you go 11-1 and you lose in the ACC championship,
you might have
got a case. But I don't think they will give you. They've just told you they've got more good teams, more brand names in those conferences than ever. They'll put in a 10-2 Tennessee that does not make the SEC championship game over a 10-2 Florida State.
It depends on who the wins and losses are to. If you have a road loss by 3 to Notre Dame and a road loss to an 11-win Miami team by 3 down in Miami, and you have wins over Clemson and wins over SMU on the road and whatever the schedule, we'll figure out who's what, right? But that Tennessee team loses to, okay, I got to look at Tennessee's schedule, but
it matters about the patch. It's not about It's not about the patch of the school. It's the patch on just to the left of it.
No, it definitely matters. No, I'm not saying that it doesn't. And this is set up for the SEC and the Big Ten. This whole thing is set up for the SEC and the Big Ten. And I did say that when we go to the Big Ten or the SEC and we play in a given year a schedule that is ranked number 1 in the country because we're playing LSU, Alabama, Ole Miss, Florida. We keep Miami on the schedule. We have, whomever, right? So all of a sudden you have 8 games against top 20 teams and you lose 3 of them. I'm going to be the guy going, screw the 12-0 BYU squad that's trying to get in this playoff over our 9-3 ass. They can go to hell because they didn't play anything close to the schedule we did. I'll be that guy.
No, I don't think you're going to be wrong in that instance. Not to relitigate last year, but we scheduled hard last year, and we did beat the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. And in the second half, we shut his ass down in a way.
It didn't help us that LSU ended up. He was great, but LSU's defense turned out to be a sieve to everybody they played, and they lost games. If we had been the team that knocked them off, and they only had like one other loss, but they.
No, I mean, Auburn took Georgia to the mattresses. Auburn took Alabama to the mattresses. They lost tons of games, but Auburn was a feather in the cap of the argument for Alabama. LSU was not a feather in our cap. So losses only matter when losses are told to matter.
But Tom, okay, so we agree on this to an extent. Let's not pretend Alabama didn't beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. Sure. I mean, that helped the resume beyond just being in the SEC. They beat Georgia, who we both think is the best team in the country. So I don't think they should have got in over us. If you wanted to do it, you could have screwed Texas, I suppose. And you couldn't do that because they beat Alabama head to head. But Alabama's resume wasn't devoid of really quality wins. Beating Georgia in the SEC title game is a hell of a thing.
They also had a quality loss, because they played Texas on the road, and that put them in a position better than where we were. They played
Texas at home and lost. Texas beat Alabama at Alabama.
Oh, sorry. Forgive me. So it's even more of a quality loss that Texas came to them in their home backyard, and they lost at home to Texas. So that makes it even more quality because, Texas.
I agree. If you're deciphering between undefeated and a loss, that you have to, at that point, especially with a conference champion that's undefeated, you have to put FSU in. Hence the argument. We're in agreement on that. I just push back on FSU folks who say, well, Alabama was terrible. Well, Alabama was not terrible. They beat Georgia in the SEC championship game.
Well, which is why I thought if Georgia even made the playoff and we did with Jordan, we had a crack at it because Georgia showed its ass often enough last year that you go to Auburn and you allow that Auburn team to take you all the way. Did they go to overtime or did they eke it out in the fourth quarter of that football game? I mean, so you're either going to choose what a team is in their best week or you're going to choose the resume. And the resume was for Florida State. What Alabama is in its best week is immaterial to me because they lost a football game. If you're going to argue that what a team is in its best week should be what gets you into the playoff, then Georgia should have always been in the playoff. Florida State should have won national championships, plural, in the 90s that they were not qualified to win because they lost a football game. But we devalued the wins and the losses. And I think to return to the original point that because they did it last year, it makes it easier to do again. And that's where if it's close, man, and it's like Jameis and Jacob Coker. If it's close, I'm going with Jameis. If it's close, they're going with Tennessee. If it's close, they're going with Ole Miss. They just are. It has to be unequivocal. You have to have insulation beyond insulation. I thought it was unequivocal last year. I've got to change the definition of that word to beyond Alabama, Texas, and Florida State proof because, good God, they'll do it again at 12, just like they did at 4.
Georgia and Auburn, for people who don't remember, were tied at 17 heading into the fourth quarter. That was the 5th game of the year. Georgia won the game in regulation 27-20.
Okay.
That was the final score of that game.
That Auburn team, unbelievable football team.
It is weird that Auburn team, as bad as they were, scared the hell out of and should have beaten Alabama and was tied in the fourth quarter with Georgia. What a weird Auburn team.
And I wonder, so if Bama lost and then they beat Georgia, if they lost to Auburn, it's 2 losses, but they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game, what would they have done? Would they put Texas and Georgia in and held us out? I'm telling you, man, I don't know that we were ever getting in. They might have put a one-loss non-SEC champion Georgia in with Texas and held us out and said, you're not one of the best 5 teams. I don't know that we were ever getting in.
You certainly can make the argument that it's not impossible to think that they were going to do that given what they did.